Hi everyone, Phone the Call Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Yard Act album, Where's My Utopia? Here we have the second full-length LP from UK rock outfit Yard Act, a band that when they made their full-length debut in 2022, you could say they were one of the most standard, direct post-punk outfits to make it in the UK lately. The dance grooves, the funky bass lines and rhythm guitars, the snarky and sort of humorous, witty spoken word vocals. The band's sound was solid but still very boilerplate for this genre of music broadly, and while their adherence to this sound obviously provided them this golden opportunity of exposure, long-term there is a ceiling of potential for this sort of thing, even if it is in vogue at the moment. And I think Yard Act is acutely aware of this, to the point where they're even unafraid to throw out some meta-commentary about this very phenomenon on one of the lead singles to this LP, We Make Hits, where you get some mission statement bars like, I just want to make a point that the culture would have died and post-punk's latest poster boys wouldn't have got to ride on the coattails of the dead. It goes on from there later in the verse saying, and there was one singular ambition we had that most musicians of our ilk aren't willing to admit, and it was to this mantra we could commit, we make hits. The framing is obviously funny and very tongue-in-cheek, but also post-ironic to the point where it's clear they're not bullshitting. I mean, why else would a song like Dream Job go so hard? Cause while much of Yard Act's post-punk influences remain intact on this record, they are really going for it with the sharp hooks, the colorful vocal layers, the pumped-up dance beats, the arranged instrumentation, and the final result of that on this particular track, We Make Hits, is like an underground weirdo's read on what popular music sounds like. Plus, they end the song off with a fail-safe finish saying, and if it's not a hit, we were being ironic. But again, does not sound like they're really being all that ironic, cause I don't think a band that has relegated themselves to obscurity would take so many shots in the dark on a record like this. Cause the main issue with Yard Act's debut, as solid as it is that it was kind of one note, one dimensional. Meanwhile, Where's My Utopia is anything but almost to a fault. You don't simply get post-punk on this thing. There's also synth-pop, hip-hop, disco, alternative dance, very clear nods to popular music acts that have an alternative appeal, like Gorillaz, as well as Beck. And Yard Act ups the ante instrumentally on this record in an attempt to pull this off too, with surprise passages of pianos, strings, horns, resulting in moments like GRIFTER'S Grief that sounds kind of like a muddily mixed Cracker Island B-side. And that kind of ends up being a consistent issue for me with this record. Yard Act is clearly taking on more sounds, more layers, more ambitious narratives and concepts, and they're kind of chaotically throwing all of it at the wall to see what sticks, rather than taking the time to organize it carefully so that it'll have maximum impact. Take the closing moments of When the Laughter Stops with Katie J. Pearson, for example, which does get kind of grating at the finish with Katie's do-do-do-do-do vocal harmonies. Then after that, all of the walls of laser synthesizers and a super dramatic spoken word passage that apparently is like a Macbeth quote. And it's just so much. It's complete and utter overload, even for somebody like me who typically gravitates toward chaos and weird details. And there are other admirable examples on the record of Yard Act kind of pushing outside of their comfort zone, stacking their ambitions high, but the mixes are slightly bungled and the messaging doesn't fully translate. Be that on the intro track, An Illusion, which presents a smattering of quirky but grim bass lines, synth passages that transition into these cartoony and idyllic dream pop choruses that speak to a sense of disillusionment, singing about having once been in love with an illusion. From here we have a string-kissed outro with 007 lead guitars twanging away in the background, some very grandiose group vocals too. It's just overblown in a way that comes across as tacky and a little messy. I have a similar issue with some of the very stacked up and weakly mixed layers on the track The Undertow too. And look, it's unfortunate because I can appreciate on some level the way these tracks contribute to the overall theme and narrative of the record, the central question it's asking. Where's the happy, functional, meritocratic world I was promised as a child, the utopia in question? And much of the record here is spent coming to terms with that loss, while also processing a lot of formative and sometimes traumatic childhood memories along the way, with a surprising amount of water references. The song Down by the Stream, which is a moving and revealing meditation on bullying and regret, set to some banger boom-bap style beats and some pretty solid rap verses too. Keeping things nautical, there's also Fizzy Fish, which I'm not as crazy about song-wise. It's kind of cluttered and tense to a fault, but I do like that it uses fish as an allegorical device to explore the inequities of the world, and also make references to more childhood experiences that are further dove into on the track that takes place in the seaside town of Blackpool, Blackpool Illuminations, which is a spoken word type cut that's framed like a conversation with a therapist, telling the tale of a holiday trip that takes a surprisingly bloody turn, but then suddenly shifts into this bait and switch outro that reads sort of like a non-ending to the story and ultimately tells the audience that this was all pointless, maybe even a lie, and I'm just trying to teach you how to cope with this same loss of Utopia, this disillusionment that I'm dealing with. But I feel like the track would have hit a lot harder if it did a better job of cutting to the chase. Because especially as we start to lose sight of these spoken word vocals under string sections and jazzy flute solos, we're kind of getting too deep into the weeds. Kudos though on the Fizzy Fish callback. But yeah, for Yard Act, this record is really a head scratcher, even if some parts of it are deeply enjoyable, because this album contains some of the band's most accessible material, but also inaccessible material yet. And as far as its central themes, ideas, and concepts, it's kind of a scattershot experience in terms of it trying to formulate these observations on Armageddon, growing up. Honestly, it kind of feels like drowning. It really does, especially as we reach the final moments of the last track. And yeah, it does bring this drowning sensation in a way that is very unpleasurable, but also so accurately eerie to the story and the ideas the record is trying to get across. So yeah, I'm a bit torn on this one. I love the ideas going into it, instrumentally and lyrically. I like the variety. I love the ambitious layers the band is trying to put forward, though they're not always well assembled. There's a ton of creativity on this record. It's just that the execution leaves a lot to be desired sometimes. It's unfocused in some respects while also being hyper-focused in others. And hopefully a future album from Yard Act can find a bit more balance. Maybe a steadier narrative hand. I'm feeling a strong 6 on this one. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up or a link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Yard Act, forever.